Every small town has its mysteries. In Santiago, the greatest of them was a white-haired man with a slow gait who wrote one letter per week. He didn't talk to anyone, didn't carry a cell phone, nor walked in a hurry. He simply walked to the post office, put the letter in the collection box, and returned home with the same silence in his eyes. Mr. Antero was the type of person who seems to live in another era. There was something about him that reminded one of times when love was written by hand and longing dwelled in waiting for a response. For 40 years, he maintained the same habit, faithful, firm, without explanations. People found it strange, but over time, they stopped asking. It was easier to respect. What no one knew is that all those letters had a certain destination. Clarice, the woman he loved and who one day had to leave. A promise made in youth sustained that love in silence. But one detail went unnoticed by everyone. None of those letters had reached their destination. 40 years later, some renovation at the post office brought to light a forgotten cabinet full of sealed envelopes, undelivered correspondence, feelings filed away by chance. And when those letters returned to Antero's hands, something inside him changed. The pain, the doubt, and a hope he thought he had lost. This is a story of eternal loyalty, of love that survives time, and of words that, even when trapped, keep alive the memory of those who are gone. A story that perhaps is more about you than you imagine. Some stories don't need exaggeration nor embellishment. They simply exist, quiet, kept in the folds of time, waiting for the right moment to touch those who need to hear them. This one you're about to hear is one of those. A tale of longing, of love from the past, of hope that resists even when the world seems to have forgotten. In times of haste, when everything lasts seconds, there exists a rare type of love that writes itself slowly, letter by letter, week after week, with a faithfulness that few understand. It's like planting a seed in the desert, even without knowing if it will ever rain. And that's exactly what Mr. Antero did for 40 years, wrote letters without ever getting a response. But what would happen if, suddenly, all these letters returned to his hands? And if there were, deep within those undelivered words, an interrupted destiny and a chance to start over? That's what you'll discover now. And believe me, this story is more than touching. It's transformative. If you get emotional, as many have already been moved, take advantage of this moment and subscribe here to the channel. Each story we tell is made to warm the heart, and your subscription helps keep this flame alive. Like the video if you feel something true, and comment below where you're watching from. What's your city? What's your country? Let's turn this space into a meeting point of good memories. Now take a deep breath, because this story has the power to make you remember someone, or even yourself, in that forgotten part of the heart where old promises and words that never reached their destination dwell. On the cobblestone street where time seemed to move slowly, everyone knew Mr. Antero. He was discreet, walked with a tired step, but carried a serene expression on his face. Every week, on the same day and time, he walked to the city's post office with a carefully sealed envelope. It was a simple gesture, almost imperceptible, but one that over time awakened the curiosity of those who observed him. The neighbors commented quietly, "There goes Antero with another letter." No one ever knew who he was writing to. There was no visible sender nor any response. The neighborhood mailman, who had seen this ritual repeat for decades, simply respected the silence of that habit. It was as if that letter was more than paper and ink, as if it were an extension of something that still pulsed in his chest. Mr. Antero's house was simple, with walls yellowed by time and a small garden where he cultivated rose bushes. He had no television, nor frequent visitors. He lived among old books, newspaper clippings, and a wooden table where he spent hours writing. His routine seemed monotonous to hurried eyes, but there was an invisible force there, a silent hope that made him keep going, week after week. Many years before that silent routine, Antero had been a young man in love, full of dreams and romantic ideas. He lived in the interior of Minas Gerais, where Sunday dances and notes exchanged in notebooks were the social networks of the time. It was there, at one of those dances, that he met Clarice, a young woman with a shy smile and a gaze that seemed to hold all the secrets of the world. They lived an intense love, one of those that are discovered gradually between letters and secret meetings. But destiny, always full of curves, made Clarice have to leave. Her family moved hastily to the coast because of her father's work. On the eve of farewell, under a flowering ipé tree, she held Antero's hand tightly and said, "If the world separates us, always write, I'll wait." That's how it all began. That promise was engraved not only in Antero's memory, but also on paper. The first letter was written days after Clarice's departure. He told how the neighborhood was empty without her, how the smell of flowers reminded him of the perfume she wore. And since then, every week, he wrote another one. Like someone watering hope, like someone writing to keep alive the memory of a love that time didn't have the courage to erase. The years passed, but Antero never stopped writing. Even without response, he continued with the ritual, as if each letter were a chapter of a book only he knew where it ended. The words continued, loaded with affection, as if Clarice was still there, reading on the other side, smiling at the descriptions of daily life. The love of the past didn't fade, it just changed form. In the letters, he told about the city, the new neighbors, the mailman who had aged along with him. He talked about the books he was reading, the songs that made him remember her, the dreams he still had. It was correspondence full of deep feelings, written not out of obligation, but out of necessity of the soul. Each envelope was a little piece of the longing he refused to abandon. Antero believed that Clarice had gone far away, maybe even out of the country, or perhaps her family had forbidden any contact. Even so, he never stopped writing. For him, as long as he could write, that old promise would still be alive. It was his way of continuing to be faithful to Clarice's memory and to the love that survives, even in silence. There were moments when the longing pressed harder than normal. On those days, Antero wondered if it still made sense to keep writing. That's when he decided to try to find Clarice again. He searched in old notebooks, newspaper clippings, yellow pages, trying to find an address, a number, any clue that would lead him to her. He even visited neighboring cities, talked to old mutual friends, and even wrote to local radio stations asking for help, never fully revealing her name. In an era without internet, everything was slower, more difficult, but he didn't give up. Each failed attempt became reason for another letter, where he placed, along with words, a little of the frustration and hope that resisted. He also looked for priests, old teachers, and even knocked on the door of an elderly woman he thought was Clarice's relative. Nothing. Time seemed to hide Clarice like a well-kept secret. And even so, Antero continued to write. Because deep down, he knew that we don't always write to be read. Sometimes we write so we don't forget who we were and who we loved. Over time, the figure of Antero walking toward the post office became part of the city's scenery. It was like the church bell or the factory whistle at noon, something that was simply part of the days. Neighbors noticed, whispered, but no one dared to ask. There was a certain respect in that persistent solitude. The oldest mailman, Mr. Valdemiro, already recognized the handwriting on the envelope before even opening his bag. Once he commented quietly, "He writes beautifully. It looks like poetry." But he never had the courage to question the destination of the letters. Something about that routine said it shouldn't be disturbed. It was a sacred gesture, as if Antero were praying with paper and pen. Some younger people thought it was an old man's madness. Others, more sensitive, saw there a testament of eternal loyalty. From time to time, someone saw Antero looking at the sky after mailing a letter, as if expecting a response in the wind. The silent mystery became part of the city's imagination, and even without understanding, everyone felt that there was something stronger than time there. There was love that survives. Decades passed until the old post office branch in the city closed its doors for renovation. The structure was old, with creaking wooden furniture, dusty files and drawers that no one opened anymore. During cleaning, a rusty cabinet was forced open, and what was inside left everyone silent. Dozens of letters, carefully stacked, all addressed to the same person, Clarice Souza dos Anjos. The new manager, recently transferred from the capital, was intrigued. When leafing through the envelopes, he noticed that they all had the same handwriting, firm yet delicate. They were undelivered letters, forgotten by an error at the post office. No one knew why they were never mailed, nor how they spent so many years hidden. Among them, the oldest dated back 4 decades, the most recent from a few days ago. With a heavy heart, the manager decided to look for the sender. Antero Barros da Silva, a name that the city's residents knew well, but that now took on another meaning. He was more than an old man with a calm walk and distant eyes. He was a man who, for 40 years, had written with true love, without knowing that his correspondence had never left there. And at that instant, everything changed. It was an ordinary afternoon when Antero heard 3 gentle knocks at the gate. On the other side, a young man in a blue post office shirt held a box with an expression of respect and nervousness. "Mr. Antero," he asked, "I found something that belongs to you." The old man didn't understand immediately, but upon seeing the envelopes stacked inside the box, the world seemed to stop for an instant. He recognized each one, the handwriting, the dates, the paper folds. They were his letters, all of them, intact. For a few seconds, he was without reaction. His eyes filled with tears, but none fell. He just pulled up a chair, sat down slowly, and took one of the letters in his hands, like someone reuniting with a part of himself he thought was lost forever. The silence there wasn't empty. It was full of everything that was written with love. The young mailman, visibly touched, sat beside him and listened, in silence, to the beginning of reading one of the letters. The text spoke about a flower that was born in Antero's garden, about a memory of Clarice's laughter, about a dream he had had with her. The young man swallowed hard. At that moment, he understood that he wasn't just delivering old papers. He was returning stored memories, and perhaps, who knows, a last chance to fix the interrupted destiny. That night, Antero didn't sleep. He spread all the letters on the table, like someone looking at an entire life in pieces of paper. The weight of the discovery was immense. Clarice had never received any of the messages he had written so carefully. The error at the post office had silenced 4 decades of deep feelings. It was as if time had been cruel by distraction. Gradually, he relived each memory he had deposited there, each forgotten birthday, each important date, each word that expected a response. Everything was suspended in the air, like an echo of a love from the past that had been suffocated by the silence of time. It hurt. But more than pain, there was a feeling of injustice, as if something had been stolen without him even knowing. And on the other side, how would Clarice have interpreted that silence? Would she think he had abandoned her, that he gave up? Antero felt his heart tighten just imagining. That wasn't just forgotten correspondence. It was a hidden truth, a secret revealed too late. But still, amid the shock, a flame rekindled, the hope that resists. If she was still alive, maybe there was still time for a belated reunion. The next morning, Antero woke up with a different brightness in his eyes. For the first time in decades, he felt he had something concrete, a real reason to look for Clarice once more. Together with the young mailman who volunteered to help, he began to trace possible paths. They searched old records called registries, visited newspaper archives, and even searched on social networks, being careful to keep the description vague. With each new clue, hope strengthened. They discovered that Clarice had lived in various cities in the interior of São Paulo, but no certainty about her current whereabouts. A similar name in a health registry caught attention. It was little, but it was something. And for Antero, after so long writing in the dark, that small thread was like light at the end of the tunnel. During the searches, Antero maintained serenity. There was no revolt, just the sincere desire to know if she was well. With each call, he adjusted his glasses and took a deep breath, as if preparing his heart for any answer. If Clarice were alive, he didn't want explanations or excuses. He just wanted to deliver by hand what could never arrive, the words that carried the most faithful love he had ever known. It was on a cloudy afternoon that one of the searchers finally brought a familiar name, Clarice Souza dos Anjos. Living in a simple nursing home in the city of Sorocaba, registered as a widow with no children, Antero could barely hold the paper in his hands. The young mailman offered to accompany him, and together they made the most important trip of his life, carrying a box of memories kept for 4 decades. Upon arriving, they were received with delicacy by a caregiver who led them to the garden, where an elderly woman with white hair and a lost gaze looked at the sky. It was Clarice. Time had marked her face, but hadn't erased her essence. When Antero approached, she took a few seconds to recognize him, until she murmured, with a choked voice, "You really came." She thought he had forgotten her, that promise under the ipe tree had been nothing more than dreamy youth. Upon seeing the letters, she cried silently, touching each one with trembling hands. Then she got up slowly, took a box from the nightstand and showed something that made Antero get emotional for good. An old diary filled with written pages. For him. Clarice had also written, but never had the courage to send. The interrupted destiny finally was completed, not as before, but with the peace that only a moving reunion can bring. The story of Antero and Clarice soon spread through the neighborhood. It wasn't long before the young mailman organized a small gathering in the city square, under the old bandstand where so many memories had been formed. He asked Antero's permission to read some of the letters aloud, and when the reading began, silence took over the place. It was as if each word had been written for everyone who was there. People listened with teary eyes, many holding hands, others embraced with those they loved. The letters spoke of a love that survives, but also of the beauty of daily life, the smell of coffee, the singing of birds, the emptiness of a Sunday afternoon without news. That wasn't just a life story, it was a mirror. Many saw there their own longings, their forgotten correspondence, their unexplained silences. Over time, those readings became tradition. Every last Sunday of the month, the square filled with people to hear excerpts from the letters. Young people, elderly couples, people alone, all came to hear the moving story of a love that time couldn't erase. And so, the words of Antero and Clarice began to touch other generations, rekindling hope, sensitivity, and the value of memories kept with the heart. Not every love needs a happy ending to be true. Sometimes, the simple fact of having existed already makes it eternal. Antero and Clarice taught us that deep feelings aren't measured by time, presence, or response. They live in the silence of time, in the memories of a love, and in the hope that resists, even when everything seems lost. The forgotten letters became a symbol of something greater, of promises that cross generations, of emotions kept with care, and of stories that still need to be told. In a hurried world where everything becomes a quick message, Antero's story is a gentle reminder that words written with truth are never lost. Even if they arrive late, they still have the power to transform. And maybe in the end, that's what matters most. Knowing that what was written with the heart always finds a reader, whether after 40 days or 40 years. Because feelings like theirs don't age. They just wait for the right moment to touch someone. And if this story touched you, maybe it has already fulfilled its destiny.